The Super Monkey Ball franchise has spent the past decade in absolute freefall. After debuting in 2001 with a pair of phenomenal arcade platformers on the GameCube, the series fell into a sharp decline, with Sega releasing well over a dozen increasingly terrible video games. A slow-motion 15-car pileup of bad games, culminating in a monstrosity called Super Monkey Ball Bounce, a terrible Peggle clone released on smartphones in 2014. Now, Super Monkey Ball Bounce is important. It's a symbolic representation of how far the monkey fell from the tree. This game, it seemed, was the furthest Sega could possibly stray from II's Divine Light. Not content to simply desecrate the Monkey Ball franchise with pale imitations of the original game's core gameplay, Bounce took it one step further. With Bounce, Sega intended to squeeze what little blood there was left in this stone by throwing a Monkey Ball skin on a game that had literally nothing to do with Super Monkey Ball. A shameless cash grab copy of an old PopCap game the world had already lost interest in 7 years earlier. Now, after Bounce came a period of quiet. This game, it seemed, was the end of it, a final bullet in the head of the long-suffering monkey-based franchise. And with the Monkey Ball franchise finally laid to rest, face down in a shallow grave that Sega barely bothered to kick dirt onto, one couldn't help but wonder, how did we get here? Why did Super Monkey Ball go from this to this? Well, if you ask me, it all comes down to two simple words: daddy issues. Let me explain. See, from the very beginning, the Super Monkey Ball franchise was shepherded by one brilliant man, Amusement Vision studio head Toshihiro Nagoshi. A bright-eyed young man with a background in creating fun, colorful arcade games, Nagoshi not only conceived the original Monkey Ball arcade release in 2001, he also served as the director of the GameCube games Monkey Ball and Monkey Ball 2, the absolute height of the series' quality. It was an incredible moment in Sega's history. See, here they had this savvy young Japanese game designer who had just created an arcade series so excellent, so simple, and perfect, and irrefutably fun that it had actually made the jump to home game consoles and secured Sega an exclusive partnership with Nintendo. At this point in his life, it would have taken something big to draw Nagoshi's attention away from Monkey Ball to somewhere else, to have him take his eye off the Monkey Ball, as it were. But then, one fateful day, that something arrived. And that something was Project J. Turns out, Monkey Ball's success wasn't enough for Nagoshi. He wanted to create something other than Super Monkey Ball, something bigger. This all led up to one key moment, and it was in 2005 when Nagoshi held a press conference in Tokyo's Shinjuku ward where he said, quote, "For a while now, I've wanted to create a powerful, gritty drama where you feel the sense of humanity. After a lot of thought, this is the product we've arrived at." The product, overseas, would eventually be known as Yakuza. At the time, the Western media described it as a, quote, new Shenmue-like PS2 game from the Super Monkey Ball team. And this game was an enormous undertaking, with a development budget of a whopping 2.4 billion yen. And in order to justify that high cost, a sacrifice had to be made. Around the time that Yakuza development began, Nagoshi's studio, Amusement Vision, the studio that brought us Super Monkey Ball and F-Zero GX, among other things, was dissolved, merged into Sega's new entertainment division. Their goal? To shift focus away from arcadey pick-up-and-play games like Monkey Ball and refocus on making, quote, epic and film-style titles. Slowly but surely, Nagoshi began to change, inside and out. The sweet young man who created a whimsical series about cartoon monkeys bouncing their way through a colorful world, that man began to vanish, and in his place, a hardened, tanned, tough-as-nails exterior began to form. One troublingly reflective of the Yakuza gangsters he'd sacrificed his baby in order to tell stories about. Now, of course, the Super Monkey Ball series continued, but without Nagoshi at the helm. Bit by bit, he stopped directing the new Super Monkey Ball games, serving as a distant producer rather than a hands-on director. Toshihiro Nagoshi had remarried into a new family now with new children, and besides, who had time for Monkey Ball with Yakuza 2 on the way? Eventually, Nagoshi turned his back completely on Super Monkey Ball, ending his directorial duties on the series. But before he did that, the newly Yakuza-fied Nagoshi served as director on one last Monkey Ball game. A game that, in my analysis, would ultimately go on to kill the Super Monkey Ball franchise. That game?
Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz!
See, Banana Blitz was a big deal for the Monkey Ball franchise. Putting aside a handful of re-releases, handheld ports, and an extremely ill-advised platformer, Banana Blitz was the first true Monkey Ball game since the phenomenal Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2. And better still, it was a launch title for Nintendo's brand new Wii console. And indeed, on paper, this seemed like a marriage made in heaven. I mean, here we had a game series about rolling a ball around on a stage and a game console built around physical motion controls. Ostensibly, Banana Blitz was the perfect fit for the Wii. Unfortunately, it wasn't. It was bad. The motion controls felt crummy and imprecise, a far cry from the level of precision Monkey Ball fans were used to getting from the GameCube's phenomenal 8-way analog stick. But despite what critics would have you believe, the motion controls weren't actually the biggest problem with Banana Blitz. The problem was deeper, more philosophical. See, to make up for these clunky motion controls, the Banana Blitz team came up with a pretty clumsy solution. Just put guardrails around every single level. That way, you can't fall off. But Nick, you're asking, doesn't that defeat the entire point of the game? Isn't that a complete betrayal of the core design philosophy of Super Monkey Ball? The answer is yes. I mean, despite the silly name and colorful appearance, those first two Monkey Ball games were shockingly hardcore. A brutal expression of unadulterated, pure level design. Like an overripe version of its namesake fruit, Banana Blitz was softer. Much softer. Banana Blitz's hardest stages were easier than some of Monkey Ball 2's easiest. Compare this late game level in Banana Blitz to this pretty early level in Super Monkey Ball 2. The difference in challenge is astounding. Because of the series' roots as a quarter-munching arcade game, the original two Super Monkey Ball games were tough as all get out, just challenging, skill-testing experiences. With the release of Banana Blitz, Sega had chosen to shave all these edges away, often literally. To a fan of the first two Monkey Ball games, playing Banana Blitz felt like going to a bowling alley and then trying to bowl with the bumper rails up. Sure, the ball rolling action was technically there, but virtually all the challenge and skill testing had been sucked out of it, and you felt like a stupid baby for even playing it. Combine this wrong-headed approach to level design with the totally unnecessary addition of a jump button, strange variable character stats, and bafflingly boss battles for some reason, and you had a certifiable bad game on your hands. After Banana Blitz, Monkey Ball eventually expanded beyond the Wii, but the damage to the game's DNA had already been done. Super Monkey Ball had left its motion controls behind, but tragically, as new games released, the guardrails remained, often to accommodate janky, imprecise control methods like the Wii Remote, the DS Stylus, and even the Wii Balance Board. Sega continued this pattern for years. They kept making Monkey Ball games with worse and worse control schemes made playable by easier and easier levels. Perhaps the most egregious example of all is the one I just alluded to, Super Monkey Ball Step and Roll, a game so rife with guardrails that you have to get 19 levels deep before you can find a stage where falling off is even theoretically possible. Heck, even the guardrails have guardrails in this game. All that to say this, Toshihiro Nagoshi's final game as director of Super Monkey Ball set the series on a destructive course that led to the franchise's undoing, and was such a spectacular failure, at least to Monkey Ball fans, that its mistakes have echoed through the series for an entire decade. So, fast forward to 2019. The 10th Yakuza game is on its way, Toshihiro Nagoshi now looks like this, and nobody has seen or heard from the Monkey Ball franchise in 6 years, long enough to declare it legally dead. During this period, the only time Super Monkey Ball even crops up in the news is when Nagoshi tells Famitsu Magazine he never understood why it was popular in the first place, one final stab in the back to the franchise he created and later helped destroy. By this point, Monkey Ball fans the world over, myself included, had just given up on the idea that the franchise would ever return. The franchise's last entry, that shameful Peggle clone I mentioned, was a big enough disaster that Sega had actually delisted it from the App Store. A truly horrible, if perhaps fitting, note to end the series on. At long last, after over a dozen bad games, it seemed the franchise was finally dead. And right then, right as Monkey Ball fans the world over had finally abandoned all hope, this happened. I remember this clearly. I woke up one morning, got on the computer, and saw these headlines. Sega revives Super Monkey Ball with a new trademark in Japan. New trademark suggests that the Monkey Ball series is returning. Sega trademarks Tabegoro Super Monkey Ball in Japan. Out of disbelief, I even went and looked up the Japanese trademark application myself, and there it was, clear as day. A trademark for Tabegoro Super Monkey Ball, quietly filed by Sega from the safety of their Shinagawa City headquarters back in April. It goes without saying that this was huge news to the Super Monkey Ball fan community. After a decade of scorn from Sega, Monkey Ball fans were finally opening our hearts and allowing ourselves to get excited again. In the comment section of articles all over the internet, you could find Monkey Ball fans lighting up with cautious optimism about this new game. The media breathlessly reported on this as a, quote, new game in the Super Monkey Ball series, and honestly, who could blame them? There had never been a game called Tabegoro Super Monkey Ball in the series history, so all signs pointed to this being a brand new title in the franchise. Which is why it felt like such a betrayal when one morning I woke up to see the following email in my inbox. An email I see in my nightmares every single night. This email revealed that the game known as Tabegoro Super Monkey Ball, the game we had all been getting excited for, it was not a new game at all, but a remake. And out of the entire Super Monkey Ball library, out of every game they could have chosen, they chose this. Not the fan-favorite front-runner GameCube games, not even the half-decent PlayStation Vita game, but the very game that symbolized Monkey Ball's decline. I was in disbelief. Honestly, this didn't even seem like a decision that was made by a human. This felt like, in many ways, the cruelest possible move Sega could make here, and I'm not alone in feeling that way. To take this beloved franchise from the brink of death only to remake a mediocre Wii game that served as the bellwether of the franchise's decline, it was unimaginably inhumane. It'd be like if Sega forgot that Sonic existed for most of a decade and then triumphantly announced Sonic's return by proudly announcing that they were remaking and remastering Sonic 06. And it seemed as though Sega was almost going out of their way to rub salt into this wound. Take for instance the game's launch trailer. I'm not kidding, this is the line that they open the launch trailer with.
It's a brand new Super Monkey Ball game!
Unbelievable. Now, the comments on this video are predictably pointing out the same thing I am, that it is absolutely not, in any sense of the word, a new Monkey Ball game. But it wasn't just the comments on this trailer where Monkey Ball fans rose up to make themselves heard. A cursory glance at the Steam reviews of Monkey Ball Banana Blitz HD should make it immediately clear that this is a game nobody wanted. And to be totally honest, as a Monkey Ball fan, this whole process, this roller coaster of emotions that Sega put us on, it stung. The announcement of this brand new Monkey Ball game only to have the rug pulled out from under us for the 16th time, it hurt a lot. And you might be wondering, so what? If you hate the game so much, just ignore it. No one's forcing you to buy it. Unfortunately, dear viewer, that is where you're wrong. In the lead up to Banana Blitz HD's release, Sega has come out and explicitly said that they're open to making more Monkey Ball games in the future, if and only if Banana Blitz HD sells. The headlines were clear, quote, buy Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz HD and Sega might remake the original games. In essence, Sega was holding the franchise hostage, telling Super Monkey Ball fans, hey, buy this game, the game precisely zero of you were asking for, if you ever want to see your precious II again. So, it pains me to admit this, but I did. Choking back bile, I finally caved and purchased the bad video game. And ultimately, since Banana Blitz HD is priced at a very reasonable $29.99, the cost of the game wasn't really the issue. The cost on my soul, on the other hand, was far too much to pay. And that's to say nothing of the guilt I felt from people who had watched my prior Monkey Ball content and mistaken it as an endorsement of this deeply mediocre Monkey Ball re-release. Over the past couple months, I've seen countless comments from people who purchased Monkey Ball Banana Blitz HD after watching my documentary about the original game's narrator, assuming that this was a blanket endorsement of the entire franchise, and trusting that Sega wouldn't bother remastering one of the least worthwhile games in the series. The guilt from that broke me. After all this, I felt hollow. I found myself sitting here staring at Banana Blitz HD in my Steam library, hating what Sega had made me become. Not just a bad video game buyer, but a man who was haplessly aiding and abetting in the sale of bad games to his trusting audience. It was too much. Before long, I knew I had to hit back. I had to hit Sega where it hurt. And in order to do that, I would need to head directly to the source of the anguish. So I booked a ticket and got on a flight to Tokyo in search of revenge. After a 12-hour flight, I arrived in Japan and began devising my plan. I knew I had to figure out a way to strike at the heart of Sega and do something that would really get my message across. I had to figure out something I could do that Sega would hate, something that they really, really didn't want anybody to do. And that's when I remembered it. For years now, I've been on the receiving end of email communication from Sega's PR team. If you remember, the moment that the Banana Blitz HD bombshell was dropped on me, that news came to me courtesy of an email from Sega PR. And for as long as I can remember, one aspect of Sega PR's emails has always jumped out at me. Contained in the sidebar of each and every Sega PR blast is the following disclaimer, quote, "Please note, any alteration of art assets provided in this email, including but not limited to flipping, major cropping, drop shadowing, stroking, glowing, and or color brightness contrast modification, is strictly prohibited without express prior consent from Sega. Thank you for your cooperation." Well, unfortunately for Sega, one man wouldn't be cooperating. Step 1 was selecting an art asset to vandalize. In order to make my message clear, I knew I had to select an image from the Banana Blitz announcement email, and after looking through a few screenshots, I finally chose my victim. Gone on a snowboard. Hurriedly, I opened the image in Adobe Photoshop and began executing each and every one of Sega's forbidden edits. Flipping, major cropping, drop shadowing, stroking, glowing, color modification, brightness modification, and contrast modification. I took a deep breath. It was done. I sat back and looked upon the monstrosity I had created. I had just broken each and every one of Sega's 8 commandments, and to be honest, the rush was exhilarating. The next step would be to take my creation from the digital world into reality. Luckily, Japan had a solution for that too. I walked over to a nearby Lawson convenience store and got to work.
Welcome. Thank you for...
すいませんって言って俺の声で持ってたから大概音符で言われる。
いつもローソンをご利用いただきありがとうございます。短期や長期間働き方などさまざまなことをもっと笑顔になるローソンをありがとうございます。ローソンでは店内の動画や写真での撮影はご遠慮いただいております。お客様のご理解とご協力をお願いいたします。
After just a couple minutes, there it was. In my very hands, I held it, the greatest piece of protest artwork since Pablo Picasso's Guernica. Now, all that was left was to hand-deliver my message in person. Here's where it gets tricky. I'm sure this goes without saying, but Sega has a much larger footprint in Japan than it does here in America. Simply typing Sega into Google Maps produces dozens and dozens of results in Japan, largely thanks to the high quantity of Sega arcades located all over Tokyo. But I didn't want to just go to an arcade, I wanted to go to Sega itself. So I loaded up Wikipedia. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wikipedia isn't the most reliable website in the world. Heck, I've even been personally led astray by Wikipedia when it comes to seeking Sega-related info.
That's not me.
It's not you!
No.
But nonetheless, I persisted. I loaded up the Wikipedia page for Sega and boom, not just a city, but a photograph of the headquarters itself, and alongside it, an address. The Sumitomo Fudosan Osaki Garden Tower, located in Tokyo's Shinagawa ward. I knew where I had to go. I made my way to Shibuya Station and began traveling towards Shinagawa. In all my visits to Tokyo, I'd never been to Shinagawa before, in large part because I never had any reason to. This neighborhood was known for being the headquarters for many large corporations, including Namco Bandai, Lawson, and, as of January 2018, a little company called Sega.
ご乗車ありがとうございます。
As I disembarked from the train and began approaching the tower, the sky began to turn to an ominous gray color, and the pit of my stomach began to fill with a sense of dread. Briefly, I stopped to apply some tape to my artwork, and during this brief reprieve, I couldn't help but thinking, was this a terrible idea? Should I really be messing with Sega? This is a company with a revenue of over 200 billion yen every year, and a company whose alleged ties to the Yakuza are one of the worst kept secrets in video games. The stories out there, often told under cover of anonymity, were terrifying. Destruction of property, even kidnappings. To quote one man interviewed in John Saponiak's book, The Untold History of Japanese Game Developers Volume 2, Sega was well versed in using the underworld to get what they want. So if you're going up against them, you have to be smart. I gulped. Before I knew it, I was there. I had arrived at Sega's headquarters. Trying to muster the courage to go inside, I began pacing back and forth in the street. Here I was, about to go inside the headquarters of a powerful gaming company with alleged Yakuza ties, all to deliver a message about the state of Super Monkey Ball, a series whose creator, with all due respect, looked like he got bit by a Yakuza 15 years ago and started slowly transforming into one. I was scared, but then I remembered why I was doing this in the first place. Not just for me, but for everyone who cared about Super Monkey Ball. The old fans, the speedrunners, and most poignantly of all, the newcomers. I had to do this to avenge the people who watched my Monkey Ball videos and, thinking the game looked fun, went out and accidentally bought a bad video game. No matter how scared I was, I had a responsibility to these people, to make penance for them wasting their money on a not good video game and to help ensure a better future for the franchise I loved so dearly. I had no clue what awaited me on the other side of those doors, but all I knew is that I'd come too far to turn back now. I stuck my hidden camera in my shirt pocket, began filming, and stepped inside. Cautiously, I begin exploring the building. Upon walking in, I'm shocked to find that this lobby is enormous, a space the size of an airport terminal. There was a restaurant, a convenience store, a coffee shop. This skyscraper had everything, and I began to wonder why someone would ever leave this place. Pretty soon, I spotted a company directory and I made a beeline towards it. I began poring over the list, the names of dozens and dozens of huge Japanese companies. But then, alphabetically under S, I found it. Sega Games Co. Limited. Trying not to look suspicious, I keep walking, my heart and my head both going a million miles per hour, and it's then, while making a quick adjustment to my hidden camera, that I nearly collide with a uniformed security guard. I freeze. He's staring right at me. Terrified and trying not to blow my cover, I keep walking forward, mere feet from the security guard, and then miraculously, he turns away from me, revealing that he was actually just helping walk an older man towards the exit. Close call. Doing my best to keep calm, I walk out of the headquarters and regroup. This skyscraper has multiple entrances, and I know that if I walk around the perimeter of the building, I could re-enter from behind and make a second attempt. On the other hand, I also now know that if the security guard sees me a second time, walking around looking confused, I'd be toast. I began racking my brain about what I might say if I get confronted. Should I pretend I have a meeting at Sega? Who is my meeting with? Do I make up a fake name? Thinking fast, I pull out my phone and begin taking a fake phone call.
Yeah, I'm in the lobby area.
Thinking that this operates both as a pretty good disguise and as a way to surreptitiously get better footage of the premises. It starts to dawn on me that I'm running low on time. Here I stood in the belly of the beast on the reception floor of Sega, and I knew that the longer I spent wandering around aimlessly looking like a confused foreigner, the more likely it would be that somebody would ask me what on earth I was doing there. Likewise, I only had this one sticker, which meant one shot at this, and I knew I had to put it somewhere it would be seen, somewhere that every Sega employee would lay eyes on it, and where it would have the maximum possible psychic impact. And right then, that's when I noticed something. the front desk of Sega Sammy Holdings, the enormous 300 billion yen company consisting of all things Sega, located perfectly next to the front entrance of the building. Every Sega employee coming in or out of this space would have to walk past this sign and would end up seeing my beautiful creation. And, most miraculously of all, it was completely unmanned. This was it. This was the perfect target for my operation. I knew that I only had a few moments before a Sega employee came back to guard the desk, and I had to act fast. A wave of adrenaline comes over me. I desperately want to look over my shoulder to see if I'm being watched, but there's just no time. It's now or never. I pull out my sticker, approach the front desk, and... now all that was left was the escape. Unsure whether or not I had been seen, I began briskly walking out of Sega's headquarters, hoping not to arouse any more suspicion than I already had. I step through the doors. It dawns on me that I hadn't even thought about my escape plan. I felt foolish. The getaway is the most important part of any heist, and I had no plan in mind, so I just began power walking back to the nearest train station. Outside, it had begun to rain. I didn't even bring an umbrella. Briefly, I allow myself a moment to turn around and look back on the building I had just infiltrated, my mission complete, and then, just as quickly, began pacing back to the train station. Eventually, the rain getting heavier and heavier, I finally make my way to a busy intersection and manage to hail a taxicab.
Shibuya? Shibuya, hi.
And it's there, sitting in the back of the cab, safe and sound, shirt soaking wet, driving away from the scene of the crime, that it dawns on me. I had done it. I had succeeded in enacting this small yet powerful bit of vandalism, all in the name of a simple message. We, the fans of Super Monkey Ball, we deserve better. The next day, as I flew back to America, satisfied by a successfully completed mission, I thought about why I did this in the first place, about what I was trying to prove. And the truth is, a lot of people, myself included, sincerely love Super Monkey Ball. When I close my eyes and think about the beautiful fan art people have drawn celebrating those first two games all these years later, it feels abundantly clear to me that there's no shortage of passion for Monkey Ball in the world. The sad part, if you ask me, is that for the past 15 years, it appears that passion exists everywhere except inside of Sega. And the responsibility fell on me to bring some of that passion inside those walls.
Ready? Go!
Now, a couple months have passed since my expedition to Sega HQ, and in that time, my perspective on this whole situation has actually shifted a little. See, in researching this video and putting this all together, I found a glimmer of hope. A glimmer of hope named Masao Shirosaki. Now, you probably haven't heard of Shirosaki-san, he's definitely not a household name, but he's a game designer at Sega who's on the team responsible for Yakuza and, occasionally, Super Monkey Ball. Crucially, Shirosaki was also the director and producer of Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz HD. So you might be asking, Nick, why do you like this guy so much? Well, read one interview with Shirosaki and right away it's clear that this guy is different. Anytime this man speaks, it's abundantly obvious that he both loves Super Monkey Ball and understands what makes it good. There are a bunch of examples of this I could point to, but my favorite comes from an interview he did last year promoting Banana Blitz HD. Asked about his favorite Super Monkey Ball game, Shirosaki gives the following remarkably candid answer, quote, "I'd have to say Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2. Those two titles are well-made games with excellently designed levels that made me forget I was playing them for work reasons. In other words, he gets it. The guy gets it. He understands Monkey Ball. So the natural question that follows then is, why remake Banana Blitz? Well, about halfway through an interview, completely unprompted, Shirosaki-san once volunteered this piece of info that gives us a remarkable amount of insight into the inner workings of Sega. Quote, "I'm really grateful to the fans who still support the Monkey Ball series after all these years and who motivate me to create only the best games for them. And of course, I am aware that the most favored titles are the first 2 games. When considering how to bring Super Monkey Ball to modern platforms with the limited time and budget we had, Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz was the most reasonable option." In other words, the decision to port Banana Blitz didn't fall on Shirosaki. That decision was made by Sega. Personally, I think Masao Shirosaki could actually be the savior the Monkey Ball series has needed for 15 years now. So the final question then is, what does the future hold for Super Monkey Ball? Right now, nobody knows for sure. For now, the only clue we have to go on comes from Super Monkey Ball original narrator and my good friend Brian Matt, who posted the following cryptic message to Instagram recently. Quote, "This is going to be interesting. Something is in the works. Stay tuned. #MonkeyBall, #Sega." Now, we don't know what this is. We don't know if it's a new Monkey Ball game, if it's a remake of 1 and 2. Nobody knows for sure. But one thing is certain. If we ever get a good Super Monkey Ball game again, it's definitely because I flew to Japan and put a sticker on the wall of a large game company's lobby. Thank you for watching.